The great chamber on Station Meridian had never been so quiet. Representatives from 40 different species sat in their designated sections, their various eyes and sensors fixed on the central platform where Ambassador Kethril stood. The Vorani diplomat's 4 eyes moved slowly across the assembled delegates as he prepared to share what his research team had discovered. Commander Daniel Brooks leaned against the back wall of the observation gallery, his arms crossed over his chest. He had received the urgent summons 3 days ago while overseeing a routine patrol near the outer colonies. The message had come directly from Fleet Admiral Patricia Coleman herself, marked with the highest priority classification he had ever seen. Now he understood why. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a star map of the galaxy. 17 points of light turned gray, one after another, each representing a dead civilization. The Dazari Empire, which had once controlled 300 star systems. The Corman hierarchy, builders of the greatest space stations ever known. The Silent Ones of Vega, whose technology still defied understanding. All gone, all reduced to ruins and mysteries. My research team has spent the last decade studying the remnants of these fallen civilizations. Kethril began, his voice translated through the universal speakers. We have examined their art, their science, their historical records. We have walked through their empty cities and decoded their dying messages. And in every single case, we found the same warning. The display changed to show ancient inscriptions from each dead world. Stone tablets, metal plates, crystal recordings, and stranger things that humans had no words for. Different languages, different writing systems, different materials. But the translated text was identical. Do not disturb the sleeping world in the spiral arm. Earth only pretends to rest. A murmur spread through the chamber. Daniel felt the eyes of nearby aliens turning toward him and the small group of human observers. He kept his expression neutral, but his heart was beating faster than it should. Admiral Coleman rose from her seat in the human section. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen humanity through 2 interstellar wars. Her voice carried across the chamber without any need for amplification. Ambassador Kethril, with all respect, this makes no sense. Earth has been a member of the galactic community for 200 years. We have shared everything with our allies. Our complete history, our science, our culture. There are no secrets about our world. Kethril's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Daniel had learned to recognize as deep concern. Admiral, I understand your confusion, but please consider the timeline. The oldest of these warnings, the inscription we found on Nesser Prime, dates back 40,000 years. The Corman warning is nearly 1,000,000 years old. The earliest reference we have discovered is over 3,000,000 years old. The chamber fell silent again. 3,000,000 years ago, the ancestors of humanity had been simple apes, just beginning to walk upright on the African plains. The idea that ancient galactic civilizations had been warning each other about Earth since before humans existed was impossible to accept. What exactly are they warning about? Daniel found himself asking, his voice cutting through the silence. Every head in the chamber turned toward him. These civilizations, they were clearly afraid of something. But what? Earth is just a planet. Rock and water and air, same as 1,000 other worlds. Kethril turned to face him directly. The Varani's expression was difficult to read, but Daniel thought he saw something like pity in those 4 alien eyes. That is precisely what concerns us, Commander. Every one of these dead civilizations thought the same thing. They studied Earth from afar. Some even visited your solar system in ages past, long before your species existed. They found a small blue planet with simple life forms, nothing remarkable at all. And then, somehow, they learned the truth. A truth so terrible that they felt compelled to warn future generations, even as they themselves were dying. The display changed again, showing detailed analysis of each warning. Some described Earth as a trap. Others called it a prison. Several referred to something sleeping beneath the surface, something old beyond measure. And one inscription, the most recent, left by a species that had died only 50,000 years ago, contained a phrase that made Daniel's blood run cold. The children of the sleeper walk among the stars now. They do not know what they are. When they remember, when the sleeper wakes, nothing in the galaxy will remain unchanged. Admiral Coleman's face had gone pale. Around the chamber, alien delegates were whispering urgently to their aides. Several had already left, presumably to contact their home governments. The careful diplomatic order that humanity had worked 2 centuries to build was crumbling before their eyes. "We need answers," the Admiral said, her voice steady despite her obvious concern. "Real answers, not ancient superstitions. There must be a rational explanation for this." Kethril lowered his head in what Daniel recognized as a Varani gesture of respect. "We agree, Admiral. That is why the Galactic Council has authorized a joint investigation. We propose a comprehensive study of Earth itself, using the most advanced archaeological and scientific methods available. If there is something hidden on your world, something that frightens civilizations capable of building empires spanning hundreds of systems, we must find it. Before it finds us." Daniel walked out of the chamber an hour later, his mind spinning with everything he had heard. The corridor was crowded with alien diplomats and their staff, all of them giving the human officers a wide berth. He could feel their fear, their suspicion, their uncertainty. 200 years of friendship and cooperation, threatened by warnings from ghosts. He found a quiet observation window and stood there, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, past the glittering lights of the station, past the busy shipping lanes and the border outposts, was Earth, his home. A small blue marble that had given birth to his entire species, that had nurtured them through millions of years of evolution, that had launched them into the cosmos. What secrets was it hiding? His communicator beeped. A message from Admiral Coleman, ordering all senior officers to report for an emergency briefing. The investigation was beginning immediately. Whatever truth lay buried in Earth's past, humanity was going to find it. Daniel took one last look at the stars, then turned and walked toward his destiny. Behind him, through the observation window, the galaxy continued its ancient dance, indifferent to the small creatures who were about to discover that everything they believed about themselves was wrong. Dr. Catherine Moore had spent 30 years digging through the bones of the past. She had excavated ancient temples in Peru, uncovered forgotten cities beneath the Sahara, and led the famous Antarctica project that discovered structures buried under 3 miles of ice. She thought she had seen everything that Earth history had to offer. She was wrong. The military transport that carried her to the Pacific Ocean refused to tell her their destination until they were already descending toward a massive research platform floating in the middle of nowhere. Armed guards escorted her to a briefing room where Captain Gregory Palmer waited with a folder stamped with more security classifications than she had ever seen on a single document. "Dr. Moore, thank you for coming on such short notice," the captain said, gesturing for her to sit. "What I am about to tell you is known to fewer than 50 people on Earth. After today, you will be the 51st. Catherine sat down, her curiosity overwhelming her annoyance at being dragged away from her work. "I assume this has something to do with the alien warnings everyone is talking about." Captain Palmer nodded. 6 months ago, one of our deep-sea survey drones detected an anomaly in the Mariana Trench. We sent down more advanced equipment to investigate. What we found has changed everything we thought we knew about our planet. He pressed a button, and a holographic image appeared above the table. Catherine leaned forward, her eyes widening as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. It was a structure, enormous beyond anything she could have imagined, resting on the ocean floor at a depth of nearly 7 miles. The architecture was unlike anything in human history, unlike anything she had seen from the various alien species humanity had encountered. Smooth curves blended with sharp angles in ways that seemed to shift and change even as she watched. "How big is it?" she whispered. "Approximately 15 kilometers in diameter. The main structure is buried under 200 meters of sediment and rock. Based on our geological analysis, it has been there for at least 3 billion years. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. 3 billion years. Earth itself was only 4.5 billion years old. When this structure was built, life on the planet been nothing more than simple bacteria floating in ancient seas. The implications were staggering. "That is impossible," she said, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were not true. The evidence was right in front of her. "We thought so too," Captain Palmer replied. "But we have confirmed the dating through 17 different methods. The structure is real, and it is old beyond comprehension. We need you to help us understand what it is." The descent took 4 hours. Catherine sat in the cramped observation pod of the deep-sea excavation vehicle, watching the darkness of the ocean press against the reinforced windows. The pressure at this depth would crush a normal submarine like a paper cup. Only the most advanced human technology, combined with materials reverse-engineered from alien spacecraft, made this journey possible. When the structure finally came into view, illuminated by the vehicle's powerful lights, Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. It was beautiful, terrifying and impossible and beautiful. The surface was covered with patterns that seemed to move in the light, symbols and images that told stories she could not yet read. She knew, with a certainty that went beyond logic, that she was looking at something sacred. Over the following months, Catherine led a team of the world's best scientists in exploring the structure. They mapped its corridors, cataloged its artifacts, and slowly began to decode its inscriptions. The beings who built it had called themselves the architects, and they had been old when the first stars were young. They had seeded life throughout the galaxy, nurturing it across billions of years, guiding evolution on countless worlds toward intelligence and civilization. But even the architects could not escape entropy. They knew that eventually, no matter how powerful they became, they would fade and die like everything else in the universe. So they created a plan, a way to preserve their knowledge, their wisdom, their very essence beyond the end of their existence. Earth was that plan. Catherine stood in the central chamber of the structure, staring up at a crystal formation that pulsed with soft light. The inscriptions on its surface had taken her team weeks to translate, but now she understood. The planet she had lived on her entire life, the world she thought she knew, was not what it appeared to be. "It is a cocoon," she said to the assembled military and scientific leadership via video link. The entire planet. The architects did not just build this structure. They built Earth itself. The core, the mantle, the crust, all of it was designed and constructed with a specific purpose. Admiral Coleman's face was pale on the screen. "What purpose?" Catherine took a deep breath. "They are still here. The architects. Not dead, but sleeping, waiting. The entire planet is a vessel for their consciousness, their memories, their power. And according to these inscriptions, they designed a species to watch over them while they slept, to protect the cocoon until the time came for them to wake." "What species?" Captain Palmer asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Catherine looked at her own hands, studying them as if seeing them for the first time. Hands that could build and create, that could write and paint and reach for the stars. Hands that had evolved on a world specifically designed to produce them. "Us," she said quietly. Humanity. We are not the result of random evolution. We are the children of the architects, created to guard their sleeping forms until they are ready to rise again. Every war we survived, every plague we overcame, every challenge we faced was a test. A way to ensure we would be strong enough, smart enough, worthy enough to inherit what they left behind. The silence that followed stretched on for a long time. Catherine understood their shock. She had felt it herself when she first realized the truth. Everything humanity believed about itself, about its history, about its place in the universe, was built on a foundation of lies. They were not the masters of their own destiny. They were caretakers, guardians, children waiting for their parents to wake up. But as the days passed and she continued to study the architect inscriptions, Catherine began to see another truth. The architects had not created humanity as servants or tools. They had created them as heirs. The galaxy had every reason to fear what was sleeping beneath Earth's surface. But perhaps, just perhaps, that fear was misplaced. Perhaps what was coming was not destruction, but transformation. The cocoon was beginning to stir, and humanity would soon learn what it truly meant to wake up. The news spread through the galactic community faster than any ship could travel. Within hours of the discovery being leaked, every major alien species had begun recalling their ambassadors from human space. Within days, trade routes that had operated for 2 centuries went dark. Within weeks, humanity found itself completely alone. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Harris stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Horizon, watching the last Varani merchant ship activate its hyperdrive and vanish into the void. She had served alongside Varani crew members for 8 years. She had celebrated their holidays, learned their songs, attended the hatching ceremonies of their children. Now they looked at her like she was a plague carrier, something dangerous that needed to be quarantined before it spread. "All sectors are reporting the same thing," said Ensign Christopher Young from the communication station. His voice was hollow, defeated. "Every alien species is pulling out of human space. They are dismantling joint research stations, canceling trade agreements, even abandoning colonies where humans and aliens had lived together for generations." Nicole gripped the armrest of her command chair hard enough to turn her knuckles white. "Have they given any official explanation?" "Just the standard diplomatic phrases. They say they need to reassess the relationship, that they require time to process the new information. But we all know what they really mean. They were afraid. The warnings from 17 dead civilizations had hung over the galaxy like a curse for millions of years. And now everyone knew that the source of those warnings was very real. Earth was not just a planet. It was a bomb waiting to explode, a monster waiting to wake, and humanity was part of whatever terrible thing was coming. Admiral Coleman's face appeared on the main view screen, her expression grave. Behind her, Nicole could see the chaos of the United Earth Command Center, officers running between stations, screens flashing with urgent alerts. "All vessel commanders, this is a priority transmission. I know you are all dealing with the fallout from the galactic quarantine. I know morale is low and uncertainty is high. But I need you to focus, because what I am about to share will change everything once again." The display shifted to show technical diagrams that Nicole did not immediately understand. Cross-sections of Earth, showing layers that should not exist. Energy readings that defied physics. And at the center of it all, where the iron core should have been, something else entirely. "The research team at the Mariana site has made additional discoveries," Admiral Coleman continued. "The architects did not simply build a structure on Earth. They built Earth itself, layer by layer, over millions of years. And at the heart of our planet, where we always believed there was molten metal, there is actually a construct of unimaginable complexity." Nicole leaned forward, her fear temporarily forgotten in the face of such wonder. What kind of construct? We do not fully understand it yet. But Dr. Moore's team has translated enough of the architect inscriptions to know its purpose. It is a preservation matrix, a device capable of storing consciousness, memory, and identity on a scale we cannot comprehend. The architects did not die when their physical forms failed. They uploaded themselves into this matrix, billions upon billions of minds merged into a single unified intelligence. They are still alive, Nicole breathed, inside our planet. More than that, they are beginning to wake up. The Matrix is showing activity for the first time in 3 billion years. Power systems that have been dormant since before life evolved are coming online. And there's more. Admiral Coleman paused, seeming to gather her strength before continuing. The architects left a protocol, a set of instructions for what should happen when the awakening begins. They called it the final purpose, and according to Dr. Moore's translations, humanity plays a central role in its execution. The next few hours were a blur of briefings, classified documents, and revelations that rewrote everything Nicole thought she knew about her species. Humanity had not evolved naturally. They had been designed, engineered, guided over millions of years by subtle interventions from the architect matrix. Every genius who had pushed human civilization forward, every leader who had united them in times of crisis, every breakthrough that had seemed to come from nowhere, all of it had been part of a plan. The architects had created humanity to be their successors. Not servants, not tools, but children who would inherit everything they had built. The preservation matrix was not just keeping the architects alive. It was preparing to transfer their knowledge, their power, their accumulated wisdom of billions of years directly into human minds. They are going to make us like them, Nicole said quietly, sitting in her quarters after the briefings ended. That is what the other civilizations were afraid of. Not that the architects would destroy the galaxy, but that they would create something new. Something that could reshape everything. Her communicator chimed. A message from Admiral Coleman, personal and encrypted. Lieutenant Commander Harris, you have been selected for a special assignment. The architects left specific instructions about who should be present when the awakening reaches its final stage. Your name appeared on the list they encoded 3 billion years ago. Report to Earth immediately. Nicole stared at the message for a long time. Her name. Somehow, impossibly, beings who had built planets and seeded galaxies with life had known her name before she was born. Before humanity existed. Before the first fish crawled out of the primordial ocean. The idea should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something she had not expected. Hope. If the architects had seen her in their ancient visions. If they had included her in their plans for the future of all life, then perhaps the coming change was not something to fear. Perhaps the dead civilizations had been wrong. Perhaps their warnings had been born not from wisdom, but from jealousy, from the knowledge that humanity would become something they could never be. Nicole began preparing for the journey home. Behind her, through the viewport, the empty stars waited in silence for whatever was coming next. The signs appeared slowly at first, easy to dismiss as natural phenomena or instrument errors. Earthquakes shook regions that had been stable for millions of years. Strange lights danced across the night sky in colors that scientists could not explain. Animals migrated in patterns that defied every model of behavior, as if responding to signals that humans could not hear. And everywhere, in every country, in every city, people began to feel something they could not name. A pressure in their minds, a whisper at the edge of their thoughts, a sense that the world they knew was about to end. Samuel Dixon had never paid much attention to galactic politics. He was a farmer in Kansas, same as his father and grandfather before him. His world was soil and sky, crops and weather, the simple rhythms of planting and harvest that had sustained his family for 6 generations. But even he could not ignore what was happening to his fields. The wheat had grown overnight, not in the normal way of living things, but in perfect geometric patterns that stretched across his land like some giant had drawn on the earth with a pencil. Circles and spirals and shapes that seemed to shift when he looked at them from different angles. The soil beneath his feet hummed with energy he could feel through his boots, a vibration that seemed to match the beating of his own heart. Samuel stood in the middle of his transformed fields as the sun rose, his weathered hands hanging at his sides. He was not a religious man, had never been one for church or prayer, but in that moment he felt something he could only describe as sacred. The earth itself was waking up, and somehow, impossibly, it knew he was there. On the other side of the world, Dr. Linda Chang watched her instruments go haywire in her Beijing laboratory. Gravitational waves were pulsing from somewhere deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Waves that should have been impossible outside of colliding black holes or the first moments after the Big Bang. Her equipment was the most sensitive on the planet, capable of detecting the footsteps of an ant from 1,000 kilometers away. Now it was overwhelmed, drowning in signals that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The whole planet is resonating," she told her colleagues, her voice shaking, "like a bell that has just been struck. Something is causing the entire mass of the Earth to vibrate at a frequency we have never seen before." In Sydney, Professor Matthew Kelly documented the appearance of symbols on ancient rock formations that had stood unchanged for 40,000 years. The symbols matched the architect inscriptions perfectly, as if the stones themselves had suddenly remembered a language they had always known. Aboriginal elders came to see what was happening, and instead of fear, their faces showed recognition. Their oldest stories spoke of a time before time when the earth dreamed and its dreams shaped reality. Now, they said, the earth was waking from its long sleep. In London, researcher Elizabeth Porter made a discovery that would have been headline news in any other circumstance. Human DNA, she found, contained sequences that had never been active before. Junk code that scientists had ignored for decades was suddenly switching on, changing the fundamental structure of human biology in ways she was only beginning to understand. People across the world were reporting strange dreams, sudden insights, abilities they had never possessed before. Something in humanity itself was transforming. The Galactic Council, despite their fear, sent one final delegation to Earth. Ambassador Cathral stood before the United Earth Assembly in Geneva, his 4 eyes wet with emotion. Behind him stood representatives from a dozen species, all of them watching the human leaders with expressions that mixed terror with something that might have been respect. "We have studied your planet from orbit," Cathral began. "We have analyzed every piece of data our instruments could gather, and we have come to understand something that our ancestors and the 17 dead civilizations who warned us about Earth did not." He paused, looking around the chamber at the human faces. Some showed fear, others determination, still others a strange calm that suggested they already knew what he was about to say. The architects were the first intelligent beings in our galaxy. They arose billions of years before any other species, in an era when the universe itself was still young. They had time to do things that we cannot imagine, to build wonders that we can barely comprehend. But they also had time to grow wise, to understand that their power meant nothing if it died with them. Cathral turned to face Admiral Coleman directly. "They did not fear death, Admiral. They feared waste. They feared that everything they had learned, everything they had built, would be lost when they were gone. So they created a plan to ensure their legacy would survive. A plan that took 3 billion years to complete." "Earth," Admiral Coleman said quietly. "Yes, Earth and humanity. You are not their guardians, watching over their sleeping forms. You are their heirs, designed to receive everything they ever were. The 17 dead civilizations feared you because they sensed what you would become. They saw a small, primitive species on an unremarkable planet. And somehow they knew that when the architects finally woke, that species would become something beyond comprehension. Samuel Dixon's phone rang as he stood in his transformed wheat field. It was his daughter calling from the city, asking if he had seen the news. The president was giving an emergency address. Scientists had confirmed that something was rising from the center of the Earth. The world, she said, was about to change forever. Samuel looked up at the sky, where strange lights were beginning to gather, even though it was still morning. He thought about his grandfather, who had fought in the last Great War. He thought about his children and grandchildren, scattered across the country and beyond. He thought about what it meant to be human, to be the children of beings who had built planets and seeded galaxies with life. Let it come, he said quietly, to no one and everyone. Whatever it is, let it come. We are ready. Across the Earth, billions of humans felt the same thing. A readiness, an acceptance. And deep beneath their feet, older than the mountains and deeper than the seas, something ancient began its final ascent toward the light. Commander Daniel Brooks stood on the observation deck of Orbital Station Prime, watching his homeworld transform. The Earth he had known his entire life, the small blue marble that had launched humanity into the stars, was becoming something else entirely. The oceans glowed with light that came from beneath the waves, turning the seas into mirrors of blue and gold and colors that had no names. The continents shifted like puzzle pieces, finally finding their proper places. Mountains rising and falling in slow motion as the planet reshaped itself. And from the heart of it all, from the very core of the world, something vast and ancient was rising toward the surface. Dr. Catherine Moore stood beside him, her tablet filled with translations from the architect repository. She had barely slept in weeks, driven by the need to understand what was happening before it finished happening. Her hair had gone completely gray, but her eyes burned with an intensity that made her look younger than she had in years. They planned for everything, she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. Every war we fought, every plague we survived, every time we came close to destroying ourselves and somehow pulled back from the edge. It was all part of their design. Tests to make us stronger, challenges to make us wiser. They needed to know that we would be ready. Daniel turned to face her. Ready for what? What exactly are we about to inherit? Catherine smiled, and there were tears on her cheeks. Everything. Every piece of knowledge they gathered across billions of years. Every technology they developed. Every memory they preserved. The architects explored the universe when it was still young, when stars were forming for the first time, when the fundamental forces of reality were still settling into their final shapes. They understood things we cannot even imagine. And now, all of that understanding is going to become ours. On the planet below, the transformation reached its peak. Cracks of pure light spread across the surface, not destroying but revealing, as if the Earth had always been a wrapped gift waiting to be opened. The glow intensified until it was brighter than the sun, a beacon visible across the entire galaxy. Ships from 1,000 species, drawn by curiosity and fear and hope, gathered at the edge of the solar system to witness whatever was coming. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Harris sat in the command center of the Geneva facility, surrounded by screens showing feeds from every continent. She had made the journey home as ordered, following the instructions left by beings who had known her name 3 billion years before she was born. Now she understood why. I can feel them, she whispered to Dr. Linda Chang, who sat beside her monitoring the energy readings. The architects. They are not just waking up. They are reaching out, connecting. Every human on Earth is becoming part of something larger. Dr. Chang nodded, her own eyes distant with the same sensation. The DNA activation is spreading exponentially. Within hours, every human alive will have unlocked the sequences the architects placed in our genetic code. We are not just receiving their inheritance. We are becoming capable of using it. Across the planet, 8 billion humans experience the same moment of transformation. It was not painful, not frightening, not anything like the death the other civilizations had feared. It was more like remembering something they had always known but somehow forgotten. Like waking from a dream to discover that the waking world was even more wonderful than anything they had imagined. Samuel Dixon stood in his Kansas wheat field as knowledge poured into his mind. The secrets of the universe, the mathematics of reality, the history of species and worlds that had risen and fallen long before the Earth existed. It should have been overwhelming. Instead, it felt like coming home down in orbit. Daniel watched as a figure of pure light rose from the center of the Earth and expanded to fill the space around the planet. It was not a single being but billions, the preserved consciousness of every architect who had ever lived, merged into a unity that still somehow retained all of their individual voices. The message broadcast across every frequency, in every language, reaching every corner of the cosmos. Daniel heard it in his mind. At the same time, he heard it through the station speakers, the words carrying meaning that went beyond simple language. We are the architects. We built the first civilizations when the universe was young. We seeded life on 1,000,000 worlds, nurtured intelligence across billions of years, and waited for the day when our children would be ready to receive what we had made. 17 civilizations died trying to take our power by force. They did not understand that it could not be stolen, only given, only inherited by those we had designed to receive it. Our children have grown strong. They have proven themselves worthy through suffering and triumph, through failure and success, through the long journey from simple apes to starfarers. They are ready now, ready to become what we always intended them to be. The galaxy feared what Earth would become when it woke. They were right to fear, but not because we bring destruction. We bring evolution. We bring the next great leap forward for all life in the universe. Earth no longer pretends to rest, and neither do we. The light faded slowly, settling into the planet and into every human who called it home. The transformation was complete. Humanity was no longer alone, no longer separate from the ancient beings who had created them. They were one now, carrying the full weight of the architect legacy in their transformed minds. Admiral Coleman's voice came over the command channel, steady despite everything that had just happened. All ships, this is Fleet Command. The quarantine is over. Alien vessels are requesting permission to approach. I think they want to talk. Daniel smiled, feeling the vast knowledge of the architects settling into his consciousness like a library waiting to be explored. He thought about his grandfather, about his daughter, about all the generations of his family who had looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Now they would find out. Now they would show the galaxy what humanity, the true humanity, could do. Let them come, he said, echoing Samuel Dixon's words from half a world away. We have a lot to share. Outside the viewport, ships from 100 species began moving toward Earth. The dead civilizations had been wrong. The warnings had been wrong. What was waking on Earth was not a monster or a weapon or a curse, it was a gift. And humanity was finally ready to open it. The story of Earth was not ending. It was just beginning.